Welcome back, friends, as we continue our series on Chareidim and the Army. This week, we speak with Rabbi Eliyahu Chait. The Chait name, of course, is a household one, owing to Rabbi Baruch Chait, today's guest's father. In fact, our guest is the youngest of 11 Chait children. Rabbi Baruch Chait, of course, being the legendary mechanech, composer, musician, author of wonderful books, especially sophisticated children's books, imparting the wisdom of our Masorah in such a beautiful and digestible manner. And interestingly, considering the topics we've been dealing with, is also the founder of Marava Machon Rubin, well-known elite boys high school that is very much similar to many yeshiva high schools in America and around the world that combine secular studies in Israel, known as Bagrut, matriculation exams, with high-level Limudei Kodesh, high-level Torah learning. Of course, this was a source of great controversy back when it opened decades ago. That's not really the subject of our conversation today, but it does give you a little bit of a background and a context for the home in which Rabbi Eliyahu Chait was raised. Of course, he had his own journey, including time spent in the IDF, and subsequently, at quite a young age, he has opened a program known as Kochot to help chayalim who have been transitioning out of the army, who hail from chareidi homes, offering them a framework to learn Torah and to integrate the various dimensions of their selves as they begin the next chapter of their lives. So, while this episode is not directly about the experience of being in the army, although we certainly touch on that, it speaks to the broader discussion of where soldiers from chareidi backgrounds are actually coming from, who they are, and where they are going. Now, I do think that you'll see from this episode that it remains the case that the majority of those from chareidi backgrounds, and that's why I deliberately describe it this way, themselves are not living what we would call conventional chareidi lives. And unlike those in the Dati Leumi world, whereby perhaps the most serious and committed, both in Judaism and let's call it nationalism, are not only engaged in IDF service, but do so at the highest levels. In the chareidi community, that is not the case. Maybe say not yet the case. Maybe will never be the case. That, of course, is some of what we are speaking about over the course of this series. So I do believe as you listen and hear a description of the beautiful work that Rabbi Eliyahu is doing, it behooves us to think about what the profile is of these young men, very courageous and wonderful young men, and what demographics are not being described, and how to understand and reconcile all of that as we think about the larger picture of the chareidi society and the Torah-centric vision vis-a-vis the grand questions of Israeli civic engagement. And so, welcome again, and enjoy my conversation with Rabbi Eliyahu Chait. We are here with Rabbi Eliyahu Chait, and he is the founder and director of Kochot, which we'll learn about shortly. And of course, those listening may be familiar with the Chait name. Rabbi Eliyahu, yes, is indeed the son of the famous Rabbi Baruch Chait, who, of course, is the founder of Marava and extremely well-known Jewish musician, author, and many other things. But how are you, Rabbi Eliyahu?
I'm doing Baruch Hashem very well, as good as can be these days. Baruch Hashem.
Now, just tell us a little bit about where you're from. You obviously, as I alluded to, you grew up in the home of a master mechanech and a real great personality within the Jewish people. What was that like, and kind of what were some of the values that you were inculcated with as a young man growing up?
Okay, so as you said, I really was fortunate, very, very fortunate to grow up with a father, parents, both my parents really, but mainly my father, to be around such a person, and learn from him. I would say, one of the key things that he taught us and continues to teach us is really that a person has to first understand that he may not know what those gifts are, but he has gifts. He has special things that he has to use in order to benefit Klal Yisrael. So first, person has to understand that about himself, and then kind of go out there and figure out what those strengths are, what those kochos are, and then once he realizes it, you got to do something about it for Klal Yisrael. So he taught us from a young age. It could be music, it could be his creativity, writing books for children to deliver messages, Jewish messages, in a more powerful way. Obviously, teaching, inspiring, and really to kind of say yes to as many opportunities as possible, even if it's a little uncomfortable or challenging. But you kind of just got to jump in, and you see with time how it becomes natural, and it's really who you are. I remember from a young age already realizing that I'm going to have to do something very big with my life. I can't just be a regular guy. Sometimes that was overwhelming, but when you see someone with your own eyes actually do things and achieve things and accomplish things, then it's possible. So thank God it was very inspiring to grow up with someone like that.
Did you feel pressure as a young man? Some people, when they grow up under the shadow of people of great, charisma and accomplishment, the children can very often feel stifled or overwhelmed or overly pressured to to achieve, and maybe they just want to live a quieter life and a less public kind of environment. Was that ever a challenge for you?
Yeah, so I definitely had points in life where I felt it was too much, and let me just be regular kid. Why do I have to think when I'm 13 already that I'm going to be a Rosh Hashiva one day, or all the different thoughts. But I think that from about age 16, I went through this process of kind of like going through my own thing, I guess. Things weren't working out so great in the yeshivas I was in, and I kind of went in my own path. And someone once told me that every person's got to go through a lech lecha stage of lech lecha mi beis avicha el haaretz asher areka. You kind of got to leave your home, you got to leave your comfort zone, and then you kind of, like we spoke about before, you start discovering yourself. So once I kind of gained that freedom and, became independent, started working, and eventually went to the army and started discovering who I am, eventually you come back home to the starting point and realize, that it's not as scary and pressuring, but I definitely needed to go through that point of like, let me be my own person first. And I had to go through my thing. And I would say that really the army, in many ways, even though my father at the time was nervous for me to go, he really was, but it really showed me my leadership skills, my ability to inspire other guys. I remember my commander telling me, like, he said, Eliyahu, you don't realize what one sentence of yours is doing to the guys when you're like, come on, guys, we got this, let's go. He's like, just keep doing that. So like I kind of, even though I was kind of escaping, my little yeshiva, the world I was coming from, but Dafka through the army and the challenges, I kind of was reminded what I'm capable of, yeah, I guess.
Can you point to anything that your parents did specifically to help you forge your own identity? To any maybe like secrets, tips from for others listening out there that can help their child find their own individual identity and purpose and path, even if they themselves come from a very strong place.
Yeah. So I think that one of the most unique things about my father is that as much as he's such an inspiration and a Rosh Hashiva and Torah, Talmud Chacham teacher, he always was so open to like the coolest stuff. So many times he would take me horseback riding on Friday. Your average Rosh Hashiva that isn't a maven in horseback riding. He doesn't understand. My father was obsessed with horses as a kid, so he wanted to teach me that and open up those options. I think that, like everything that's good in life, things come with challenges. So the system, the yeshiva world, it's amazing in the sense that it continues and allows the world of Torah to thrive. But at the same time, kids are so different than each other, and they're so creative and have personalities that if you put someone into that system, you can risk, losing that beauty, that creativity, that inspiration that especially teenagers and young kids have. So there was a lot of, I would say, extracurriculum activity, if it's going horseback riding or getting me into music, trips, and kind of things that weren't, so to speak, accepted within the box and within the system, but coming from a deep understanding that if you're not going to allow the kid to have that, and the parent has to really be the one filling in that gap, then you're risking either someone that's going to kind of lose his creativity and just become a little bit more narrow-minded and it's a little chaval, or he's just going to be too curious of what's out there in the big world and leave yeshiva. And I think that many times, this is a general, I would say, a tip also in chinuch, that many times people think that because I sent my son to school, now I am free, I'm good, he's in good hands. I like to say, the school's in charge of maybe 20 to 30% of your kid's success and growth. There's still a good 70 to 80% that's on the parents. But it doesn't feel that way, because what do you mean? I'm paying for tuition and I sent him to school. The school is the b'diavad. L'chatchila is you checking in with your son every day. How is school? How's it going? What is he missing? Does he need extra help? Is he in need now to let loose a little bit? And so what, even if it's not so accepted, whatever it is, I'm going to allow him to do. So, some things you keep on the DL, and you're smart because you understand that your kid needs this so he can succeed and not be afraid of it. And I think when it comes from the parents in a healthy way, then the child learns also how to do things in a proper, healthy way and not need to sneak around or beat around the bush. The parents are very on top of that and aware that he needs that. Then I think it can allow the kid to thrive and get the breaks and expression that they need to have throughout their years in yeshiva.
Now, Marava, which is the school that your father founded and continues to run, is an interesting place because it's the kind of yeshiva that in America would be absolutely normal and unremarkable, uncontroversial. But in Israel, certainly when it was founded, it was kind of making waves, and there was controversy around it and where it was quote unquote allowed to be, and great rabbis coming out and opposing it, things of that nature, because of its introduction of secular studies and what's called the Bagrut, the equivalency exams in Israel, and having high school students taking secular studies, which again, in America is basically standard, even in the most religious places, maybe certain places not still, but it's much less of an issue in America. But in Israel, that was making a great statement. First of all, do you remember anything from that early period, or was that before you were around? But even so, regardless,
I'm the youngest of 11, so no.
You're the youngest. So it's before your time. But do you recall being raised with any awareness that you were sort of part of a family that was doing something quote unquote rebellious? And I put that in quotes because it's it's so relative, rebellious, but doing something unusual within the broader chareidi society in Israel.
So first of all, for sure, like I grew up understanding that my father had his own unique approach. So much so that the school that I started off in Har Nof, where I grew up, didn't accept kids that were planning on going to my father's school. So my brothers actually all had to leave at seventh grade as opposed to in eighth grade, so they could go to my dad's school. Because if the eighth grade teacher had known that they want to go there, they kind of would have said to them anyways, don't show up for eighth grade. So that's where I grew up. Me and my brother right over me, we moved to a different school that was way more, accepting and open-minded of it, and sent a lot of kids to Marava. So I definitely knew that, this wasn't the standard. But to be honest, that's kind of my father's personality all along, and Chait's in general, I would say, are always looking to do that next thing that the generation needs, and not everyone necessarily understands why or holding it. But my father came from America. My father, come from Chafetz Chaim world, where their whole goal was to create the ultimate, Ben Torah, who could also have a serious job and live a successful, menschlich, healthy life, with a tremendous value to Torah, Yiddishkeit, take it very, very seriously, and at the same time, not be less than excellent at your secular studies and at your job, and in all areas of life, really. So I think that, the story goes, I have to find out the exact details, that first of all, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Reb Scheinberg, who were huge gedolim, at the time, were very much behind it. So when you have people like that, it doesn't matter what they write about you in the newspaper. My father always says, as long as they get the name right, he didn't really care. But also, I have to find out, the exact details. But the story goes along something like this: that Rav Shach at the time, who was, so to speak, the one who opposed it more than anything, basically sent a message to my father: you have to open this place. It's critical. I will come out against you because it's not for my community. But there's Jews out there that need this critically. So some things are really meant more for individuals, for certain communities, and they're not necessarily for the masses. So you can't necessarily say, okay, this is lechatchila, every guy should go to yeshiva with secular studies. But at the same time, a deep understanding that if we're not going to provide such education to certain families, especially chutznikim or people that see themselves more in the work space and not necessarily choosing to sit and learn for various reasons, if we don't give them that, then what options do they actually have? So I think in general, that's been my father's approach also. The same with his music, with his books, always to kind of do that next thing that Am Yisrael needs, even though it's not necessarily your classic standard, accepted thing.
So where did you personally learn? It sounds like you went to regular chadar and regular, younger level yeshivas, and then, somewhere you snuck out for 7th, 8th grade, and then you went to where did you go? And then you went to obviously to Marava.
So the truth is I'm out of all my brothers, I'm the only one that didn't really go to Marava, and the reason was I had watched how tricky it was for my brothers to navigate being in a high school with their father as the Rosh Hashiva, and it didn't look like it was always so easy or fun. So I actually, in 8th grade, had a Rebbe who was very, very stark, and he's very into learning. He got me very, very into learning. And I actually decided that I want to try going to full-on what they call in Israel a black yeshiva, 0 secular studies. And what is my father supposed to say when his son says to him, Abba, I just want to learn Torah all day? It's so that's what I said to him when I was in 8th grade. And he said, okay, if that's what you want, then, that's what we're going to do. And I actually went to a yeshiva called Ma'oz Chayil in Beit Vagan, which is very, very hardcore, very stark place. I managed to stay there for 2 years. It's a 3-year program. Then you go to Yeshiva Gedola. By the 3rd year, I already couldn't hide the Chait in me. I was getting curious about music, and my Rosh Yeshiva said, listen, if you got to choose between music and yeshiva, this is a yeshiva. We're not here to learn music. He didn't even want me to bring a guitar to the dorm. So when that kind of was burning more inside of me, I realized I can't continue, although I have tremendous hakaras hatov, because that's where I really, really started learning how to learn. It was very intense. 3 sdarim a day. We're doing almost half a blot to a full daf of Gemara a day with almost the entire Kovitz Mefarshim, Gemara Rashi Tosfos, hardcore. And I really, really learned to appreciate, and to see how sophisticated Torah could be then. But at that point, I already started kind of a little of a journey. I did stop in Marava for about 2 months then, because I was kind of in between yeshivas. And at that point, my father realized I needed something a little different. So I went up to a program up north at the time. It moved to Yerushalayim now, but it was meant for American Israelis. There's a big issue when it comes to American Israeli from kids, because an American from kid and an Israeli from kid could be very different. An American from kid can know about baseball and could be even going to a baseball league on Sunday sometimes. He could be exposed to certain things and kind of have, maybe even be allowed to play a video game here and there. Whereas, an Israeli from kid, wouldn't in his wildest dreams wouldn't even, believe that his parents would allow him to play a PlayStation or something like that, or go to a baseball game on Sunday. So the Israeli kids that grew up with American parents and some kind of American mentality, find themselves in a little bit of a tricky position or situation when they come to yeshiva, because they have this American mentality at home, a little bit more open-minded, whereas in yeshiva it's a little bit more closed and harder to accept such kids. So a rabbi, Rabbi Moskowitz at the time, he started this program. It was up north, made specifically for kids like this, American Israelis, a lot of Harnov kids or different types of kids like that. And honestly, it was amazing for me because we learned Gemara very, very seriously, but geschmack. And in the evenings, we would go play football. We had like a PlayStation they allowed us to use. So it kind of gave us the room to breathe that we needed, but at the same time, still learning very seriously. So I was there for about a year. And then 12th grade was a little tricky for me because I was already kind of going through my own little thing. So I actually decided to leave yeshiva, and I was learning by myself with a guy who I really enjoyed too, and working a little bit. By the time I was 18, I decided I'm drafting to the army. I realized that that's what I really wanted to do, and I wasn't fitting into yeshiva at the time, but I still wanted to do something, meaningful. So
now you went through this kind of
the journey I took through high school.
Right, you went through these swings where, were people concerned? Was your family concerned? Like, okay, he's ninth grade, 10th grade, he's like this hardcore Fabrenton or yeshivish guy in Beit Began, and then all of a sudden now he's figuring it out, and now he's somewhere else. Like, what was the messaging you were getting at the time?
So to be honest, I think that I challenged my parents the least out of all the kids. So they were like, as long as I was even, learning and connected to something, it was like, okay, this isn't as bad. All of us gave our parents our fair share, but I think I was relatively okay. But yeah, there were definitely points and stages where they weren't really sure where it was going, or what's going to be with me. But I think for the most part, I always tried. I mean, for me, I found that I just wanted something that I connect to and meant something to me. And so it wasn't like I was like, okay, I just don't want to do anything and bum out. I said to my father, I want to go to the army. So he sees there's a serious kid wanting to do something serious. He had his concerns, how are you going to stay from or whatever. But at least it was everywhere I was going was I wanted to succeed. I wanted to do something good. It was just a matter of, how are we going to keep him on track and stay from, stay connected. But so I think for the most part, they saw that at least, I was in a healthy place of wanting to do and not just kind of just sit around and do nothing. But there are definitely, some points where they were concerned. But at the same time, I think because of the experience with other kids, they kind of gave me the space to just go through it, just go through your thing, with a lot of understanding and a lot of room, that you don't want to push too hard because that doesn't always result in the result that you're actually looking for.
So how did the army come into your mind as an option? Had any of your older siblings done that? It sounds like not, but maybe I'm wrong. Was that something that was discussed in your program with Rabbi Moskowitz up north? Were other guys doing that? Like, did it just enter your head? Did you have any friends? What kind of surfaced that idea for you?
Okay, so first of all, from a very young age, I was always into survival gear, hiking, very kind of an outdoors kind of a kid. From the youngest age, we lived in Harnof, close to the forest. We were going hiking, kind of always outside. Definitely in yeshiva by Rabbi Moskowitz, I started getting more into Krav Maga and just like physical fitness and stuff like that. And then my one brother over me, Simcha, number 10 in the family, actually drafted to the army. He was always in our family, the one that was more into stuff like that. And he actually was very good for him. My father was very pro him going. But he's the only one that went. And I'm very, very close to him. He's only 2 years older than me. So he kind of opened that door even as an option. But really, it was a combination of him being in there and also watching what all my friends that left yeshiva but didn't do anything meaningful with their life, where their lives were going. I remember like looking around at one point and saying to myself, like, if I don't get my life together now and do something serious, I'm just going to end up like a lot of these chevra, which are very lost, very confused, getting involved in the wrong stuff. And I remember sitting with my best friend, and he was also kind of going through the same thing. And we looked at each other like, we got to just draft. We got to go in and just make a move. I literally hopped on his tustus. We drove down to Lishkat HaGiyus, which is the offices in Jerusalem where you sign up. And we just went, we kind of just made the move. I turned 18 Pesach time. By August, I was already in the army. So,
Wow. Had you
yeah.
received any notices or anything ahead of time? Like, a year before, it's coming up, it's your time, anything like that? That was, they were even recruiting you, or that didn't even happen?
Yeah, so every 17-year-old in the country gets his first letter in the mail from the army, but that's normal and standard. And for yeshiva guy, it just means that the yeshiva office will put it in the system and make sure they send the message that he's a yeshiva guy and they shouldn't bother him anymore. Although now the laws are changing, so we're going to see where it goes. But at the time, it wasn't like, I mean, I was excited, but for a regular yeshiva guy, it's standard. You get the letter in the mail, you tell the office in yeshiva, they take care of it. But besides that, nothing really. It was really very much my own decision, meaning I completely did not have to go. I could have gotten out of it very easily. All my older brothers got out of it in all different types of ways. It was 100% a decision, meaning I understood that that's what I want to do, and it's the right thing for me. And I pushed for it to happen. They didn't need, they weren't like fighting to get me.
Was it clear that you were going to go into one of the chareidi frameworks, Netzach Yudah, now known as Netzach, and and other such programs that existed? I imagine they existed then also as well. They're only expanding now. Was that a clear, or there's sometimes people want to go and they want to go in other units that are not available or things like this, and so that's not an option. What was your path?
So to be honest, that I had not known a lot about the army. All I knew was Netzach Yehuda from my brother, and at the time there wasn't many other options. If you wanted to be a combat soldier in the army, in a firm unit, all you had was Netzach Yehuda. Today they already have a unit in the paratroopers
Chetz,
called
right?
Chetz,
Yeah.
and there's one in Givati called Tomel. Those options did not exist at the time. And I remember also thinking, I wish I knew more about the army once I got in the army and learned about it. But I think that in the long run, like everything, it was all siyata dishmaya, because physically, I felt in basic training like I could do way more. Because again, as a kid, I was very into outdoors. I was in good shape and I loved it. I was always into knives, guns, all these things. And I was like having a blast. When half of the guys were complaining or whatever, I'm like, bring it on. Let's do more. I can't wait for the next mission, the next thing. And I realized that mentally and physically, I could have done way more. But at the same time, the people that I met and thank God, the people that I helped also, throughout my service made me realize that was where my place was. And in the long run, I think it allowed me to really stay more connected to Yiddishkeit and not be necessarily exposed to too much, at a time. And it's not that I didn't know, or never was around secular people, but it's very different when you're living with them 24/7, and needing to deal with that, as opposed to generally speaking, a more friendly environment. No girls on base, mehadrin food. On Shabbos, it would not be odd at all to walk into the dining room and hear like Zmiros, like in yeshiva, so there was elements of what I grew up with. So that was nice. And I think in the long run, that protected me in many ways.
How was your experience overall? Did you see any combat? What was your role there? And how long were you in the army for?
So I drafted August in 2013. Basically, to become a combat soldier, you got to go through 8 months of basic training, where the first 4 months are very, very basic, starting from, the basics of how to use a weapon, push-ups, waking up early, doing runs, hitting the shooting range, doing all the different physical fitness competitions. And then the second 4 months is where you really start becoming more clear of what exactly your role is and job is. I was given the Negev machine gun, which is one of the most important jobs. It was a big honor to be chosen. There was only one or two from every machlaka, from every unit. And we were put through 2 weeks of training just on that gun, which you basically almost don't sleep those 2 weeks. And you have to basically be able to prove that you can't just shoot the gun, but you can climb over walls and obstacles with it and crawling. And so that was a lot of fun. It wasn't easy. We were all cut up on our knees and elbows at the end of that 2-week training, but it felt good. And then, unfortunately, once I came up to the maslul, when you become an official combat soldier, you go through your training. The 3 boys were kidnapped that summer in 2014. Unfortunately, today we're in a different situation. At the time, 3 boys was the craziest, the biggest deal. The whole world was talking about it. And we went very quickly into full combat mode. On a regular day-to-day, before this happened, we would do basic patrols in the West Bank, arrests once or twice a week. Here, once it broke out, and we actually went to search for them. My brigade are the ones that found them, and then Chativat Kfir. But we were going house to house. There was a point where we were doing close to 7 arrests a night, which on a regular day-to-day, you do 1 or 2 a week, because an arrest basically means that you're going in with your unit to get someone in a village. You have to do drills before someone comes down from the Secret Service, tells you about, who we're picking up, what are the threats. You got to make sure you're ready. So one arrest is, could be an entire 2-3 days preparation. Here we were doing about 7 a night. We were just going from door to door looking. And also because a lot of action was going down in Gaza, the army took the opportunity to put a big focus on the West Bank, because all eyes were on Gaza, which means it gave us a little bit more freedom, to kind of to clean up, so to speak, things that would be a little bit more complicated on a regular day-to-day. So I actually got to see a lot of action, many riots, on Fridays, protecting the roads in the West Bank, and patrols. We got to work with many cool units as well in the West Bank, whether it was Duvdevan and Oketz, the dog units. We've done many arrests. We've done a helicopter arrest, using drones, all different, you kind of get exposed to this whole world of army and military security. So, it was, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. It was meaningful. It was challenging. I would say probably one of the most challenging parts was to learn to get along with people more than anything, because you're thrown into, a unit with the most strange group of people. Everyone's so different from different backgrounds. There's a lot of things in common, but at the same time, you're literally 24/7 with these guys all day, all night. And it could get really, really challenging. And especially I noticed, the real difference in my upbringing than a classic Israeli. Americans tend to be a little bit more polite and, please and thank yous and respect someone's space, where, some of the Israeli kids were a little bit more rough. Now, I at least grew up a little bit more with the Israeli, in the Israeli system, but I remember many times helping some American olim, kind of get over the culture shock and figure out how to communicate with this annoying Israeli kid that they're not able to talk to. So like I told you before, I found in many ways how Hashem put me in the right place to kind of, help certain people. And it was challenging, but definitely fun. And a lot of us, stay connected till this very day from my unit, even though I've been out for almost 8 years now. I did a total of 2 years of combat. And when I finished my service, you kind of go into the reserve system, and I officially finished after 2 years. The 3rd year, because I came in as a yeshiva guy, you're on call in case they need you, but they gave me permission to actually go back and learn, which was nice. That was I would say a huge turning point in my life as well.
So where did you go at that point? I mean, you didn't have like a particular home yeshiva, right? I mean, you've been out of Bayit V'Gan. I'm sure that wouldn't be the right place to go back to. This other program,
So to be honest, I really had no clue what I was going to do. They gave us, they took us for this one day where they showed us the options that the army offers, how they can help, or, et cetera. And I felt like, they chose 3 or 4 boxes and said, choose which one's best for you. And I'm like, what if neither of these are actually good for me? Like, do I have to just accept that this is what you decided is my future? And I was talking to different people. I remember speaking to one friend, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, to be honest, like, I would want to try to get back into learning a little bit. I just don't know. I can't see myself fitting into regular yeshiva. I wasn't necessarily black and white at the time anymore. I was a little bit more open-minded, and, but I did want to learn. So a friend introduced me to Rabbi Baruch Chait, who happened to be my neighbor 4 buildings away, who I never met in my life and never knew he existed my entire life. Little did I know, I'm sitting next to my future Rosh Yeshiva. I grew up right near him, never met him. I went to his house. I told him, listen, Rabbi, I'm curious to get back into learning, but I'm a little nervous. I've been a little rusty, and I'm not looking to become all chareidi now. I just want to learn some Torah and kind of reconnect. And so I told him, we had a good conversation, and I told him, maybe I'll come once or twice a week to your yeshiva. We'll see how it goes. And he looked me in the eye, and he said, Eliyahu, you carried a machine gun every day for the past 2 years. You woke up at 4:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning. He told me these words: you'd have to be an idiot to not take that momentum and put it into your life. And he said, if you're not going to come to my yeshiva and be the top guy, so maybe you should look for a different place. He's like, I'm challenging you. If you want to come here, I want you to be the top guy in my yeshiva. And he himself told me later that he knew he was taking a little risk, but it spoke straight to me. Because, so many guys come out of the army and they go for half a year to India and they're kind of just figuring it out. And what the truth is that they're losing a lot of that kind of beast mode momentum that they created and discovered in the army. And you could understand it. A guy wants to relax and chill out. People are on top of you for so long and dictating kind of your every move. You kind of want that freedom, but at the same time, you're used to doing meaningful, real, hard, physical things. So he was right. And Baruch Hashem, it spoke right to me. And I ended up staying in his yeshiva for 5 years. I didn't imagine that I would even last for 2 weeks. My whole life trajectory completely changed. Got very, very into learning. His whole approach to learning and the way he spoke about Hashem and hashkafically with the chovas levavos was ideas I've never heard before. Again, American, a little bit more open-minded, normal. He was also a businessman. So I was able to kind of see the beauty in Yiddishkeit without I would say the old triggers from yeshiva or whatever. It was just kind of I felt like I was being reintroduced to Yiddishkeit and Hashem, and really opened my eyes to to what the Hashem really is, the Torah, Yiddishkeit, and to be able to see that basically a lot of my associations with it has nothing to do with the actual content, but it could have been a Rebbe that I didn't like, or I just wasn't ready for it. But when you actually, as an adult, look at it with mature eyes, with the right person, whoa, my life completely changed. I ended up teaching there a little bit, and he really, really gave me a lot of one-on-one time because he noticed that I really wanted to get involved in teaching as well. And he kind of took me under his wing and gave me a lot of guidance, a lot of tips. He eventually gave me a small group of 3-4 guys, said, here, start working with them and come back to me, with questions, whatever, tips, guidance. Me and my wife, eventually I got married, so me and my wife started hosting, a lot of the guys for meals, because at the time it wasn't much of a yeshiva, it was more of a chabura, and we kind of helped that transition. We started implementing Shabbos meals for the guys and trips. Me and a friend were always in charge of the Europe trip or the trip up to Tzfat. Rabbi Klein would never go. He kind of put us in charge. You run it, take care of it. So it was amazing. It was really, really a powerful experience, and the craziest thing to me was to see out of all the guys that finished that day with me, we were about 200 soldiers from boys that finished the army. I was the only one that went to yeshiva out of all the guys. And it was wild for me to see where my life was going and how, I was getting more connected and more in touch with myself, and how many of my friends were actually getting disconnected from Yiddishkeit and getting, less and less in touch with themselves and where they really could be. So I actually got to see with my own eyes every year more and more how it might be hard and difficult to sit and learn, but wow, look where this is bringing me to, as opposed to, other decisions that people made. So that was very, very powerful for me.
Why do you think so many others were not doing that? Did they just have were they coming with baggage from before, and therefore they didn't want to re-enter into that world, or were they not interested in learning anymore?
It's a combination. Number one, for sure, a lot of baggage, a lot of just, as they say, stigmas and bad associations. And honestly, a lot of these guys never really got the opportunity to see it as an adult, as a mature person, and be explained, basic stuff about Yiddishkeit. When you grow up from, a lot of times it's a given that of course you believe in God and of course you have bitachon. And what do you mean? You heard this since you're in first grade, but like as an adult person to actually think about what does it mean that I trust Hashem? Like, do I not have to worry about my bank account right now? Like, what does that even mean? How do I make sense of these things? And again, it's kind of like a given. Like, you just have to learn Torah. Everything else is a given. Of course you believe. Of course you know Hashem is. Of course you daven. And for a lot of these guys, it was like, no, I don't understand. I don't know why. So number one, there was a lot of bad associations. And number two, and I think this is maybe the most critical point, because this is, where I kind of come in at the next stage of my life, was even if they were interested, they're not going to go to a regular black and white yeshiva. The guy was in the army. He was exposed to the world. He never can imagine himself even wearing a white shirt. So where is he supposed to go, even if he is curious? So I had one or two friends that like kind of were interested in like the Leumi yeshivas, but very quickly they realized, wait, this isn't my hashkafa. I don't connect to this. Not, nothing against them. It's just when you grow up classic chareidi, all of a sudden you're hearing ideas about Zionism and stuff in the base medrash that you're like, 1 second, this, I might not be chareidi anymore, but I'm definitely not this either. So it's besides the personal baggage, it's like, where are they supposed to go? What is that new community, that new yeshiva that is like, you could come however you want and just let's talk about Hashem. Let's learn a piece in Chumash. It didn't exist. It wasn't an option. I think only because I had my English and my American background, and Rabbi Klein, who spoke right to me and was a little more open-minded, and his yeshiva were American guys, not as judgy. Some guys, you could walk around untucked. No one's gonna jump at you and be like, So that's why I was lucky enough to go. But for the other regular classic Israeli guys, there's literally no options.
So tell me about Kochot and, what exactly it is. And I'm starting to hear like a need that definitely exists, kind of a void when you have 200 young men graduating, so to speak, from a chareidi, quote unquote, battalion. And one of those 200 are returning to yeshiva. And we're talking about young men, not people 30 years old with families going back to work. Talking about young men who really, all of their contemporaries, all of their peers are in yeshiva. So I'm hearing a real void there. But tell me a little bit about how this idea formulated in your mind, when, and kind of what the steps were to take next.
So it was an interesting process, because first, within a few months of yeshiva, because I was all of a sudden like, wow, this is Yiddishkeit. This is Hashem. This is what it means to learn Torah. It kind of all started to make sense to me. Naturally, I kind of wanted to share that experience with my friends. And so I remember from literally within the first few months in yeshiva, I started a weekly shir on Chumash for my boys in the army, for my friends. And the reason is because Rabbi Klein's whole style of learning Chumash was completely different. I've never experienced before. For example, he would make us look at one pasuk and say, you cannot look at Rashi right now. You have 2 minutes, just look at the words and tell me what is the problem with this actual text. And all of a sudden I was asked to use my own brain and to analyze a pasuk and not just be like, oh, this is what it means, move on to the next. No, tell me what the problem is. Do you have a diak? Is there an issue? And we started breaking apart these psukim, and all of a sudden, you realize you have some serious questions. And then he's like, okay, now look at Rashi. And all of a sudden, you realize like how Rashi was, he didn't just, write an explanation, but he was holding in the most deepest, subtle points of why do you choose this word? Why not a different word? What's this extra word for? What is it teaching you? And like this whole new style of learning. So I kind of wanted them to experience that. So the way I got them to come is I said, all right, guys, I got a sponsor. Sometimes my mother would help, or friends. I would pick up a bunch of beer and some garinim, some seeds or whatever, create a fun environment. I said, guys, you're all going out to town tonight anyways to party. Come stop by me for an hour. I'll give you some beer. We'll have a good time, and then go do what you want to do. So we started with about 8 guys, good friends of mine, and everyone loved it. And I would say I kept that up for about a year or two. But this was just just no thought at all of program or future. This was just me trying to, get reconnected to my friends and try to help them a little bit. And it was great because I had guys telling me, listen, I said a Dvar Torah at my Shabbos table for the first time in 6 years. My father was blown away. He didn't know where I came from. I was like, yeah, I went to Shir last night. I know what Parsha it is this week, So that was awesome. And it showed me also, when you could just do one little thing and all of a sudden a few people's lives are changing. And then, to be honest, I left the Rabbi Klein's yeshiva after 5 years. And I moved from Yerushalayim to Ramat Beit Shemesh. And it was time to look for a job. And I definitely still wanted to stay in the world of teaching and chinuch. So I actually found a job by Rabbi Gach Yudin's yeshiva, in Ashrenu it's called. And I became director of Shana Bet, which means I had to teach the guys, be on top of them, be in touch with parents, take them on trips, the entire package. I had about 13 guys the first year and about 14 guys the second year. I did that for about 2 years. It was a very, very special experience. But at the same time, I got to a point where I felt like, I want to do something a little bit more. I want to do something that's more my own, And I had called my Rebbe, Rabbi Klein, just to discuss, future, whatever. And he actually said to me, my son, his own son, was in the army at the time. And he's like, he's coming out soon. And I'm not really sure, what's going to be and where to go. And then he said to me, we really should probably do something for these guys. So that's where the idea started, actually came from him. And the first thing we did was he said, let's feel it out. Let's see if they'd even be interested in what we want to do. So we got some kind of sponsor, and I put together a group of 15 soldiers that had just coming out of the army. I said, come for 2 days to yeshiva, we'll pay you X amount of money if you come. Just come, just open-minded, whatever. Don't expect anything. So two guys, we have 15 guys come for 2 days. And they loved it. Rabbi Klein went straight in with them, challenging them, asking them questions, where do you plan on being in 5 years? How are you planning on getting there? Just basic stuff. And then making them realize, I got to learn a little bit. I got to figure out, how I'm going to put this all together. So that's when we realized the need and that we actually have what to give them. The next step was how to actually make it work. Now, it's a little tricky because guys that come out of the army, especially from religious background, sometimes they're no longer in touch with their parents because they went to the army. And even if they are, they don't like going back home a lot because it's not so comfortable. They're already a little different. They're not like the other kids. They feel uncomfortable at home. So many of them live on their own in apartments, which means that they have to work right away. Right when they come out of the army, they got to make money to cover their rent, basic expenses. And because they don't have school education, stuff like that, many of them take very basic jobs like a security guard at the hotel or on the train or in the entrance to a school or working in a falafel store, where this guy, again, 3 months ago was a beast in the army doing amazing stuff. And all of a sudden, for him specifically and his potential, he's doing something way less meaningful, but just because he has to. So he said, number one, if we're going to get anyone to come, we need to give them some money, because there's no way that physically they can justify taking off an entire morning to learn when they have bills to pay. So that was challenge number one. And then challenge number two is, what are we going to actually teach? What do these guys need to hear? So that's where, thank God, my experience came in, because I knew very clearly what are the things I didn't get in yeshiva, what are the subjects that no one ever spoke about, and what it is that I really needed to hear when I came out of the army. So we built basically a half a morning program, half a day program. In the mornings, 4 hours every morning. Every hour is dedicated to a different topic, so kind of 45 minutes and a 15-minute break. They get a stipend, they get money every month. We call it a milga, every month. And I didn't want to deal at all with anything that has to do with, discipline or needing to, they're older guys. So it's very black and white. This is how much you make per month. If you miss a day or come late, I write it down. That's it. You write your own paycheck. I don't talk to anybody about anything to do with, where were you? If you're serious, you come, you'll get the full amount. If you don't. So that was an amazing chap, just to be able to avoid that. Plus they feel good, and it encourages them to wake up earlier. And then the topics were very much, first of all, Jewish hashkafa, so chovas levava, shar bechina, how do you build a relationship with Hashem? How do you start seeing Hashem in your life, in the world? stuff that they never heard in yeshiva, like that approach. So that's amazing. We start off the morning with that. Then we really do this chumash that I told you about, and one or two psukim a day. It's very slow. Everyone gets to ask questions. Everyone's involved. With Gemara, it really depends on the group. When like now, Baruch Hashem, I have a really, really strong group. So we were able to start Gemara like literally on day one. Other groups, it took me a good 2 months to get to the point where they were ready to actually learn Gemara, because there's a lot of triggers with that as well. So usually we do Gemara, and then the last one, which is the guys love it the most and the most important, is marriage class. Is talking about dating, girls, shidduchim. Does it make sense? Does it not? What should I do? What am I going to do about it? So it's a lot of it's based off their questions and things that are bothering them. And also there's a sefer that one of my Rebbeim suggested that we use that's really amazing, just to give them a basic look on what a Jewish home is actually supposed to look like. What does love actually mean? Opening up all these topics where they never got an opportunity to just ask whatever's on their heart and really understand, what's going on. I also try once a month to take them out on a fun trip, just to, kind of create a good environment. And the interesting thing is that more than anything, what these guys need is a sense of community. And because they left the chareidi world, they're like, I don't fit in anywhere. Where am I going to send my kid to school? I'm not chareidi officially. The chareidim don't think I'm chareidi. I'm not dati lomi. That's a whole nother thing. I'm not secular because I want to be religious and connected to Hashem. So the coolest thing that happens is that they discover each other. Meaning within 2-3 days, they realize, these are my chevra. These are my guys. We're all on the same page. We all have similar problems. We all love each other and get along, relatively well. So besides just the actual learning, and that guys are starting to discover, the meaning in their life. And I'm actually, I'll come in a good way, but I'll try to challenging them. I won't let a guy say a sentence that makes no sense. I'll stop and say, what did you mean by that? And then he'll be like, everyone like kind of looking at him, and he'd be like, I'm not sure. I'm like, okay, so let's talk. Let's think about it. And they could take it. They're Israeli. They were in the army, so they want someone to be, let's talk tachlis and not beat around the bush. And the future of where I want this to go, Bezrat Hashem, I envision an entire building where it's like a center for guys. Any guy that finishes the army should have the ability to come for a 3-month program. And I only tell them that it's 3 months in the beginning, because more than that could be overwhelming. I don't know. I want to fly to India after, whatever. Come for 3 months. What ends up happening is either the guy realizes how much he really wants to learn and reconnect, so he ends up coming back for another 3 months, and I give them that option, or he gets on his feet, he goes to college, starts getting his life together, reconnects to his parents, gets on a good track. We had already a couple guys that got married, got their life together. But they stay connected. They'll come to events that I do in my house. They'll pop in, one morning when they can. So they feel it's still associated with these chevra and this community. And really, like I said, ideally, where I wanted to get to is that you have this, basically the center, this building where guys could come in the morning, afternoon, or evening. There will always be staff or people available to talk to. And, you create this entire network of community of these guys that are all post-army guys. Older guys, younger guys, the older ones could help the younger ones, and basically really kind of create a whole new type of Jew, I would say, in Eretz Yisrael. A guy who on the one hand is from, grew up, Gishmak, chareidi, whatever, realized that he's not a guy that's going to sit and learn all day in yeshiva, went to the army, did something meaningful, but comes out and still is connected and still learning and still wanting to grow. And at the same time, a guy like that, it could be a powerhouse, because he's seen, what life really is about, and he's been challenged to his core in the army, and was pushed to the point where he really had to bring out, new Kochot, literally. And the main goal of the program is to say, hey, it doesn't have to stop in the army. You can continue to discover your Kochot and bring them out after the army.
First of all, I think it's very beautiful that Rabbi Klein, who did so much for you as a Rebbe, and now, years later, you're able to kind of pay him back in a way by helping his own son. I think it's very, very incredible, actually. And again, poetic in a certain way. Obviously, as soon as you open up an organization, a new institution that requires all kinds of administrative needs, fundraising, all of those kinds of efforts, it's not easy. And of course, doing that automatically means having less ability or time to focus on the core mission that you're interested in executing. How have you dealt with that part of the situation?
So first of all, I'm always curious to meet the guy that chose the word fundraising for fundraising, because I'm curious to hear how his experience was. And I always say, like, that's the only job part of this program. Everything else to me is really just I have so much fun with the guys. Like, it's amazing to every morning sit with to discover new guys. Every time a new guy walks in, I'm like, wow, look at it, like he's geschmack, like. And to see their faces when they start understanding what the Torah really is, that for me, that's the easy part. That's geschmack. The fundraising is really the challenging part. The first year, Rabbi Klein actually got one of his chevra from America to help me out, so I didn't have to worry the first year. And then he said, after a year, you're going to decide if this is really what you want to do. Then it's on you. Then it's your program. There's so much that I could do. And I'm really thankful for that, because he gave me the ability to really see without any pressure, do I want to do this? Do I not? And then from there on, it's definitely been a challenge. And, sometimes, you get help from some people and you're good for 2-3 months. And there was kufos where, like, you don't know how you're paying the guys next month. And I could say for sure that I'm lucky that I had a father that showed me that you need a lot of emunah and bitachon, and that things always end up working out, especially if you really, really genuinely are trying to do it l'shem shamayim and just help there. And I've had that. I've had times, during a mincha, I would say, Hashem, these are your children. I'm just trying to be helpful. So you got to send something to them. I can't, and I would get all of a sudden a WhatsApp from somebody or whatever. Like, I've seen some amazing stuff, but we're still very much in the beginning. We're only been around for a little under 2 years now. And I have already a nonprofit here in Israel. Someone helps me out with one in America. So the system is being built a little bit. And I'm really right now a one-man band. I do everything from the teaching to getting the guys to fundraising. And it's definitely, overwhelming and hard at times. But again, I know how important this is. I see every day the impact. So that gives me the chizuk to keep pushing. And I'm hoping and davening that Hashem introduced me to the right people, where we could get to the point where, there really are people out there that can connect to this idea and say, these are our soldiers. It's the most basic thing that, a lot of people are putting a lot of money into Kirov, in college campuses and this and that, which is amazing and beautiful. At the same time, though, like, to me, like, this is the first place we should be going. You just gave your life for 2-3 years, to protect the Yidden. We got to do something to be there for you. So I believe the people are out there. It's a matter of, hustling a little bit and waiting to meet the right people to get to that point. Until there, kind of just got to push forward. And again, these guys are the biggest reminder that I just got to keep going, because when you see, even if it could be challenging, you're sending emails at night, trying to call people in America and trying to get something going. But then the next day you come and the guy's like, Rabbi Chait, you don't know what you're doing for me. Like, I had a guy, for example, who, from the day he finished the army, had not gotten out of bed before 3:30 in the afternoon for a year and a half. I promise you, true story, a year and a half. Can you imagine? And I told him, he called me, I heard about your program, whatever. I said, okay, you got to call. He's like, when does it start? I said, 9:15 in the morning. He starts laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? He's like, I'm not coming at 9:15. I haven't gotten up before 3, So I said, I'm challenging you to come on Sunday one time. He's like, I'm like, I don't care if you don't come after that. Just prove to yourself that you could come one time. He's been in the program for a month, there every single day at 9:15. And, he can't thank me enough how, like, his life has changed, because all of a sudden he remembered that he could wake up and he does have that ability. So those stories really give me the chizuk to keep pushing forward. And, like everything, we daven and we hope that Bezrat Hashem we'll get to that point, where I could be more focused on the guys and not, needing to do the whole picture.
Do you have in mind to help these guys with things like bagrut or vocational training? Because I would imagine that some of them are coming in, or many of them, most of them, all of them, I don't know, are coming in without some of those qualifications. If they want to do more than be a guard at the light rail or work a falafel stand, they need not only the army, but they need to develop their credentials and their basic knowledge of secular studies and things like that. Is that part of the either the current process or the vision?
So first of all, for sure, it's definitely part of the vision. And also, like I said, we tend to not call it a yeshiva, also because we don't want to trigger any of them, but also because it's really not just a yeshiva. We call it more a base medrash for life. And besides, the actual curriculum that we have in the morning, I spend a lot of one-on-one time with the guys. And that was always a critical point for Rabbi Klein. That was, Rebbe Talmud, Rabbi Klein always said, if you're not sitting with the guy one-on-one, once or twice a week, then you don't really have a relationship and you can't really get to the bottom of what he needs. So when I do those one-on-ones, for every individual guy, based off where he's holding what he needs, there's one guy that I'll push and be like, okay, you got to try to get your bagrut. You got to, and I'll help them connect to the right programs. There's many programs that actually one of the guys in my program also helps them with that, just getting that bagrut. For another guy, he's not that type of a guy. He's not into learning and stuff like that. But I have a guy, he was very good at videography, but he wasn't really doing much with it. So just be like, come on, do some more classes online, try to get your name out there. So for every individual guy, where he's holding, what he's doing, we try to encourage and connect them and push them to do more things. And at the same time, I want to do more of this, but we try bringing in, different people once in a while to speak and open up their mind to different ideas. I'll give, once a week a Jewish history class. Some of these guys, they don't realize that 50 years ago you couldn't get to the Kotel. Because Yom Yerushalayim is tonight and tomorrow, I told that to them today. They're like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, the most basic things. I took them to the Kotel tunnel tours, one of the previous groups. First of all, the tour guide came over to me. After 10 minutes, he said, I don't know what you do to these guys, but I've never in my life had a group ask me so many questions so fast and so curious. I said, yeah, we're opening them up, where a guy comes over to me, he says, I didn't even know there were tunnels under the Kotel. I've been going to the Kotel my whole life, so just part of the process is opening them up, showing them, what life is and how complex things are, and try individually catering every guy to what his needs are. I have guys that are students in college. Some guys are finishing their high school studies, and other guys are just being encouraged to actually just get up and even start some kind of a job, even if it is a security guard. But if you were in your apartment for the last 6 months doing nothing, so that already is accomplishment for you. And yeah, the goal is to try to help them, each in their own way, find not just their connection to Yiddishkeit, but want to be passionate about doing something and doing something meaningful and discovering what it is that they're good at. So everyone at his pace, we for sure try to do that. And the idea and the goal is for sure to connect maybe to specific colleges and to get certain benefits from the government. And there's a lot to be done. And it's a slow and steady process, B'ezrat Hashem.
Tell me how October 7th impacted this program. I would imagine many of these young men were called back up in the reserves. Maybe you were called back up in the reserves. I don't know. But there must have been something, certainly a disrupting type of event. Obviously, of course, for the whole Jewish world, but for this specific environment, the specific framework.
Yeah, so first of all, when you run a yeshiva for soldiers and war breaks out, you don't have much clientele. But no, so the first few months, I would say the first 2 months of the war, almost every single one of my guys were called up. I also got a tzav shmona, but I do have a little bit of a health condition, like colitis. Baruch Hashem, it's nothing crazy, but it could be complex to go back to combat. So they when they heard about it, they said, we'll call you if we really need you. Haven't heard from them since. So the first few months, there was just no guys. So I was very much busy helping my guys. My brother was in Lebanon up north. I had students spread out, whether about to go into Gaza or people in the West Bank. So we were trying to, I was going around doing barbecues, helping, playing, bringing them gear, just trying to be there for them because I myself wasn't called in at the time. And then, it was also exactly the time where I was kind of becoming independent financially and all that. So I actually traveled to the States twice and did a couple of events to try to fundraise. And I said, if I'm not running the program, at least I could continue building it up and spreading awareness about it. So that was a very good experience. I didn't necessarily get to the financial goals that I wanted to, but for me, it was important to just make that first step, to kind of take a bias over it and to speak to people. And it was amazing also to see how many people were appreciative and even if it wasn't a big donation, but even if a guy who doesn't have a lot of money, he gives you $500, that's a big, like, for me, Hashem saying, like, look, people believe in it, people believe in you, people believe in the cause. So it gave me a lot of chizuk to come back and to reopen once things calmed down and they were giving soldiers breaks. And then after about almost 3 months since the war started, then we reopened. And right away, I noticed the difference in terms of how serious they were taking things. If in the previous groups, it would take a good month or a month and a half to open up the guys and just to get them into it and get used to the new, like the new groups were already way more serious, way more wanting and not even, sometimes you deal with a little bit of shtuyot. The guy hasn't been in yeshiva for 5-6 years, he forgets how the things work and he's just asking some sarcastic questions or whatever. That came down very, very in a lot of levels. And the seriousness of the guys was a lot stronger. And it also allowed me to be a little bit more direct and a little bit more like, guys, life is serious. We got to, we all see this. We're losing friends. We have friends that are injured. You got to do something with your life. Like otherwise, and it's interesting. We were actually speaking today how it's so ironic that with all the challenges and all the difficulty that there is living and growing up in Israel, we still recently in some kind of research that I think some university in Europe did, Israel came in third place as one of the happiest countries for the youth, And I said that's because a lot of us have meaning. We know what we're fighting for. We have something to fight for, which and many places in the world already are forgetting. Is there even something I want to fight for? Why should I get up in the morning? And again, it allowed life to get a little bit more serious. So with all the pain and all the challenges, really, in many ways, it actually helped speed up people's process. And I also noticed that I'm getting a lot more calls. I don't even have to reach out to guys. Guys are hearing about me. Guys are way quicker to say, let me go check that out, as opposed to, okay, maybe one day that they're like, if I don't do it now, then when am I going to do it? So in many ways, it actually allowed guys to not be as afraid to make that step and try to reconnect the Yiddishkeit and reconnect themselves, because it could be very, like I said in the beginning, it could be very scary, a lot of triggers. I remember myself the first time I put a white shirt back on. Like, first of all, it was not easy. I was like, whoa, are you sure you want to go there? And then I remember the first time I went to hang out with some of my old chevra that haven't been wearing white shirts in a while, and they saw me in my white shirt. They're like, whoa, are you okay? Like, so it seems small, but it's a really, deep psychological, emotional thing that guys, go through.
Just in closing, this may not be your expertise from a political perspective, but, just from where you stand personally, having been to the army, coming from this world that you have come from and what you're doing now, the whole topic of Gius, of drafting of Chareidim is a very, very hot subject right now. And we're standing here, as you mentioned, the eve of Yom Yerushalayim will release, sometime after that. But nonetheless, this I'm sure will still be a major topic in the air. What is your sort of prognosis or forecast of where you think this is all going? Because you're mostly talking about, again, students that have a little bit fallen off and out of things, and you're seeing kind of people, on the quote unquote weaker side of their observance levels, and they're sort of coming back in a way, and you're being mechazik them, you're strengthening them. But looking at the society at large, how do you see this unfolding? Do you see this changing in some way? Or do you think things are going to basically kind of stay the same?
So my name is Eliyahu, but I'm definitely not a Navi. But I will tell you that there's definitely a big change in the chareidi world, even if it doesn't mean that everyone's running to draft, but even the appreciation, the understanding of the necessity. So that's something that I think that is a positive thing. I myself, I've been to many bases from north till south, throughout this war. And I saw with my own eyes, so many Chareidi people coming, bringing stuff, chutznikim, Israelis. Again, it was mind-blowing to see how, the love and the wanting to get involved. And also a huge a number of young yeshiva guys that like all of a sudden, are considering it and thinking about it. I will tell you that my opinion is generally like, don't go after the yeshiva guys. It's just not, we need them. We need them to be proud of being yeshiva guys and to not for a second feel guilty or bad. I will say that anyone that's not in that category should 100% lechatchila go. But, and here's the big but, the army really has to prove that they really want it and they're willing to make serious changes. Because even though Netzach was a religious unit, and there were no girls on base and Mahadran food, there was still a lot of modifications and a lot of changes that they needed to do. And you can see that the army knows how to do it when it comes to certain communities, whether it's, human rights or whatever. I'm not going to get into it, but they know very well how to, make other people feel comfortable. And the army has not once really sat down, let's say with the Rosh Hashiva, and say to them, tell us everything that you want us to do in order for you guys to come. So I see the from people slowly becoming more open to it, but there's gonna be a real need for the army to really express that. And I'll be honest, I don't know how soon the army is gonna do that, because it works for them to not actually have the chareidim in the army, but to be able to say to them, hey, you're not drafting. It really does work for them for now, because I always say, if 3,000 chareidi boys showed up tomorrow in Lishkat Giyus and said, we want to come in, they would not know what to do with them. The army would say, give us 4 years. We got to figure this out. So there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done. And, it's complicated, but I definitely see it becoming more of a thing. And also part of what I want to do is to also have some kind of a pre-army program where a guy doesn't have to come in knowing nothing and having zero tools to deal with the challenges. Like, I really didn't know anything about the army before I went in. A little bit from my brother, but that's it. What is the army? How do the units work? What will be the challenges? What could I do to prepare? Because more and more people are being interested, and it's not necessarily those stark guys, but it's the guys that are a little bit on the fringe and guys that are a little bit more having a challenging time in yeshiva. Instead of kind of like being, all right, just go to the army, like let's make it lechatchila, prepare them, and do something kind of a little bit more similar to a Hesder yeshiva, where they have, first of all, someone that's guiding them, and at the same time, they also have someone to return to when they're done the army. Like, this is my chevra, and I drafted with them, and I came out with them, and you create this whole community. So I think it's a slow and steady process. I think forcing anything is never going to really, really work. It's going to have to come from the bottom, from the people. The people are for sure heading in that direction. More and more people are becoming open-minded. It's going to be a process, though. It's going to take some time.
What are the modifications that you mentioned that you think the army would need to make it more palatable for chareidim?
They needed to get a real chareidi involved and listen a little bit to what he wants. Just like the only person that could run a program like I'm running is someone that was actually in the army and knows the challenges, and that other people have tried. 1 or 2 people have tried in the past creating a program like I did, but it was a regular chareidi rabbi who never went to the army, and he just couldn't relate to the guys. It was not relatable, because if you don't experience what they went through, if you don't know the challenges, you don't know where their mind is, you could try teaching all day. You're not on the same page as the people. I think in a very similar way, the army has to genuinely bring in a Rosh Hashiva and say, what does a yeshiva guy need? What are his needs? What is he dealing with? What can we do to help him? And not be like, no, this is the army. He's gotta change and just fit in. Again, when it comes to all kinds of other human rights issues, the army knows very well how to cater and make special, modifications for them. For an example, the whole even Indian of kashrus, there's a job in the army, like any soldier could get this job even by mistake, to be a mashgiach kashrut. There was a time, I kid you not, that a guy in a tattoo showed up to our base. He was the official mashgiach kashrut. He had put his kippah on before. That was his job. So he comes to check the list of what's supposed to be there. But to be a mashgiach, you need your shemaim too. That's part of the ingredients. So, who are we kidding here? Or, officially no girls on base. And all of a sudden, listen, we were lacking people in the office. So we had to bring, 2-3 girls for the 2 days here to just take care of stuff. Like, excuse me, you committed to something. You can't play games with that. If this is what you're promising the parents, if a Jewish chareidi mother has to accept that her son's going to the army, she wants to know for a fact that he will be protected from certain things that she spent 18 years protecting him from. It's not fair to her, to twist her arm and say you have to send your son to the army, where you're sending him to a place where it's complete opposite of how I raised him and spent my entire life bringing him up. So if they can really, really make certain changes, and also I think that when more people draft, they can create bigger units, and then you can literally have completely your own private base and your own facilities, and it will be a little bit more organized. Then there really will be that ability. And again, I think the army is a little bit nervous of it. Like, could you imagine, like, the Satmar unit, the Mir unit, the Hebron unit? I don't think they know how to deal with that so well. So both sides are trying to figure it out. And besides the political people that are using it just for your own benefits and either to bash the Chareidim or not, forget that. Just on a technical level, both sides need to come together a little bit and say, what are we willing to give up? What are we not? And what are you willing to do for us? And what are you not? And if we could somehow meet in the middle, then I can see it really, really working. Because again, what I discover more than anything is the guys that are leaving yeshiva and not just right away going to get a job or bumming out, but that want to go to the army are some of the most quality, amazing guys that you've ever met. And so you need to be able to fit their needs. And if you know how to do it right, you can have incredible soldiers that are geschmack, God-fearing Jews, and are coming out menschlich and not completely, exposed to the whole world and just, kind of good luck. Go figure it out,
Rabbi Eliyahu Chait, the founder of Kochot, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I had a real great time speaking to you. I really appreciate your time as well.